Okay, hi everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Whatever podcast. All right, so the first thing that we'll talk about regarding pet peeves is going to be what are they? Like, what is a pet peeve? Basically, pet peeves are labeled as things that people do in a relationship that get under your skin, that you don't necessarily like or agree with, and it just makes you view that person in a less desirable way. Um, I think the key in talking about pet peeves is we think that we kind of normalize them. Like, oh, it's normal for you to get into a relationship and automatically find something that you're not gonna like about your partner. And yeah, to a certain extent, that makes sense because we're all different. We all have different backgrounds, we all have different upbringings, we all have a different idea of how things are supposed to be set up, especially in our home space. And this is why pet peeves come up and they become a big thing when people move in together because it's very easy to like one not notice or two overlook a quote unquote pet peeve that your partner um, is displaying or is triggering you with when you're not living with that person. But when you start living with them, that stuff just amplifies. It just becomes um, like deal breakers. It just becomes like unbearable. It drives you crazy. And to get an understanding of pet peeves and the root of them, because you guys know on this podcast we talk about what's the root cause of these things, because all of these things are symptoms: cheating, abuse, pet peeves, running from relationships, which is what we'll talk about in the next episode. um, all of these things all have root causes. And I find that a lot of the reasons why conversations are not really productive surrounding relationships is because we focus on the symptoms, like cheating, like avoiding relationships, like lying, like being unloyal, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on, right? We focus on all of that instead of what is actually at the core of it. So let's break down pet peeves. They really stem from childhood. Surprise, surprise, right? Um, but the key way in which pet peeves in particular stem from childhood is because it's something that your parent or your guardian or whoever you grew up with in your house, whoever you spent the most time with when you were a child, it's things that they didn't like about you. And then so when you become an adult and you don't resolve that within yourself, like you never heal that part of yourself, because it's a rejection in a sense. It's basically them saying to you, I can't love you or I can't offer you the things that you need from me in light of like love and companionship and support and a hug even, or kindness in some cases, in a lot of cases in some of our households as children growing up. We came to believe that if we didn't behave in a certain kind of way that pleased our caregivers, then they had the right to withdraw love from us. They had the right to not give us the fundamental things that we needed, the basic things that we needed, right? For some people, it was just love. For some people, it even gets to the point where it becomes physical. Your parents don't want to put a roof over your head, or they don't want to feed you if they feel like you're not benefiting them in some kind of way, right? So we grow up in that kind of mentality or that kind of structure, and then we get into relationships with people. We bring that same stuff with us. Um, and so in your romantic relationship, you're going to default to the last situation you've been in where you lived with people, right? Where you didn't live by yourself. And that's typically going to be your childhood, right? Your childhood home, how you grew up like that. And that's how you're going to that's the experience you're going to use to navigate through this new experience, this new relationship with this person who you love, right? You love this person. That's why you guys decided to move in with each other to begin with. But we're not realizing that um, when we bring all that baggage that we didn't deal with from in the past, it changes what could be very beautiful and blissful situation, living with another person and growing and loving and having them there with you all the time. what could be a very beautiful situation turns very bad and very ugly and very toxic real quick, right? So let's get back to how we default, right? So we default, and now in your new relationship, you become your parent. So you embody the energy and the characteristics of how your parent dealt with you when you were a child, and now you're projecting all of that onto your new relationship as an adult. And the sad thing is, we don't even realize that this is what we're doing 9 times out of 10. Or if we do realize it's what we're doing, we normalize it in some sort of way, right? Um, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that way, right? So now you're playing like this, this like this pretend game. You're taking on roles, and it's like a play now, and you're acting out scenes. And basically your brain does this because it's striving to heal from that experience, and because you haven't actively taken the time and created the space for yourself to heal from that experience. Your brain is saying, well, you don't want to do it, I am going to create the space and the time and the place for it to get done, because it needs to get done, for my sanity. And we're talking about our brain. Our brain does have a voice, right? Um, our soul, our spirit, whatever you want to call it, right? I believe that it's all one. Our heart should be connected to our brain and all that kind of stuff. We decompartmentalize it, or we put it in separate things, like the Holy Trinity and all that kind of stuff. I know that's kind of going off, but it's really, and how they say it's all one. Right, that's what it is. Our heart, our body, our mind, our soul, all of that is connected. It's not one entity. Um, and the reason why we've come to this place of believing that it is separate is because in order to cope with certain traumas, we need to separate our heart from our mind. If we've been told our whole life that we're crazy for the things that we think and the way that we act, we have to separate our mind from our heart and our actions in order to thrive in that space. And unfortunately, that happens to us at a time when it's the most crucial for us to be supported, and that's childhood. But anyway, I can go off on a tangent with that, but let's get back to how it's playing out in our relationships, right? So we become this character. We become our parents, our caregivers, whoever was the main person in our life when we were kids, and we act this out, and it's our brain's way, it's our body, our soul, our mind's way of healing itself. And until we become present of this process, because it's going to take place regardless of if we give it space to or not, obviously, because these things keep happening in relationships, and a lot of times we're not realizing that that's what's happening. So it's going to take place, and we need to become more mindful of it so then we can be a part of the process. And how does that look, like being a part of the process? It's going to look pretty much the same as it would in a relationship where you're not aware of the process. But the key is going to be the reaction or the conversation that takes place afterwards, right? So let me give you guys an example. Um, your unaware self is going to move in with your spouse, and you are going to push all of your pet peeves, which are really insecurities, which are really projections that some adult in your life pushed onto you when you were a child, and made you think that this is the way you had to behave in order to be deserving of love. So that's how you're treating your partner now. So now you're saying to your partner, if the dishes are left in the sink, then maybe we shouldn't be together anymore. Like that's literally the message you're giving to them. Like, I can't love you if you leave dishes in the sink. And really, like, let's think about how that really sounds, right? That sounds ridiculous. What are you talking about? Dishes in the sink, what does that matter? It matters so deeply to you because it's trauma. It's something that you haven't healed. It is a big deal to you, but to the other person who was not present for those things that happened to you in your childhood, they're looking at it like, what's the big deal? This person is crazy. They can't love, or they acted one way and now they're changing all of a sudden now that we moved in. And you guys know how that whole thing goes with relationships. We tend to blame the other person, and that's where that whole blaming thing comes in. oh, if you would just act this way, and then it comes out in the other, so then we trigger the other person to act a certain way. Maybe they grew up in a household where their actions weren't really criticized. Like they could leave dishes in the sink and it was like, okay, whatever. Mom or dad cleaned it up, or they dealt with it in in some other type of way. It wasn't detrimental to them. Like they didn't grow up in a household where they were criticized, like you piece of shit, why did you leave that? Like there are some parents who talk to their kids like that. Let's just be real, right? Um, and they may not use those exact words, but that's basically the sentiment that's being conveyed. Like that's exactly how it feels. You can say things 1,000 different ways and it could give off the same vibe. You don't necessarily have to use those same words per se, but basically that's the idea, that these parents are just aimlessly. And it's and the crazy thing about it is they don't even realize that that's what they're doing to their kids, because they have trauma that they didn't deal with from their past and their parents. Sorry, I'm sweating. I'm here in the hot tub, and I decided to jump on and talk to you guys for a little bit. Um, but yeah, so basically, your parents didn't heal from their crap that their parents put onto them, and on and on and on the cycle goes, right? And then here you are wanting to break the cycle, or in a position to break the cycle, and that's a really great position to be in. And on the other hand, it's not so great. We'll get into that. Probably being like the scapegoat of your family. I'll figure out what the title for that will be, but we'll talk about that in another video. Um, so so all of these unconscious things that happened to us when we were still developing come out one way or another, right? And okay, right. So we were, I guess, sidetracked, especially with this music, this lo-fi music going on in the background, and like all the thoughts in my head. So yes, we were about to talk about the difference, right? So you get into this relationship, and something happens. It could be they left the toilet seat down. It could be they left dishes in the sink. For me, I'm going to tell you what my trigger is with living with people: a dirty kitchen. And I can tell you exactly where that came from: my mother, because my mother is that way. She raised me to be that way. She shamed me for not being that way. And then so now when I get into relationships, it's a very, 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 very hard thing for me to not be triggered by when my partner does it. So then I find ways to compensate for that. In the beginning, it would be, I actually didn't go through the nagging phase. I didn't go through the phase of, because I know how that felt when my mom did it to me, right? So I kind of skipped that phase, and I would just be like, I'll just do it. Or, it's my job to do it anyway. I'll just make sure that the kitchen is clean. It's okay. You don't have to clean the kitchen. And then I would start feeling like, what does he think, this is my job? And then so I would kind of like passive aggressively like be like, clean the fucking kitchen, like, like kind of passively aggressively throw things out, to kind of give that hint. And then as I evolved even more, I got to a place where I started not caring about it anymore again. But then it came from a place of like, I'm doing this for my own self-care. Like this is what I need in order to feel stable in this relationship. I need the kitchen to be clean. I don't need for it to matter to this person for it to be clean. Now that's something that I'm still working through, because sometimes, especially when I'm stressed out about other things, it's just like I just don't have, because it takes a lot of energy and patience for me to not be triggered by that. Um, and so that's how I know that I'm still working through that thing, where and even now to this day, I'm presented with that situation over and over and over again, and I have come to the realization that, or the understanding that, it keeps showing up because it's me getting the opportunity to heal that part of myself, and it's gonna keep showing up until I completely heal it. So that's kind of what I'm going through right now with my current living situation. Like one, like they just don't believe in keeping the kitchen clean, and it drives me nuts. But I just get to the point where when it gets out of hand for me, like I'll leave it, and then when it gets out of hand for me, I just take a deep breath and I say, you know what? It's a me problem, it's not a them problem. I'm gonna clean it because so that for my peace of mind, so that I could feel okay, right? And then going about my day. Now, that part is pretty easy for me, especially I know when it gets hard, I know that's an indication to me that I'm lacking somewhere in the self care. Because, like I said earlier, when I get stressed out, it's harder for me to ignore triggers and behave in a more functional and healthy way. So, when I find myself like wanting to cuss the person out, I understand that, okay, Rashida, you're stressed out about something else. Because at your highest self, you're able to not care about this so much, right? So it's a process. So I'm working through that. So then in a relationship, though, because this is, you know, in a relationship with somebody that you kind of want to, like, who is your partner, your intimate partner, and you guys are friends, you might want to have a conversation with them and say, hey, like, you know, when I was growing up, this is how my parents dealt, this is how I grew up or whatever, and these are the things that happened, and this is where this is coming from. I'm working through this, and I would appreciate it if you would be patient with me while I'm going through this process, because there might be some times when I might cuss you out. And then I might even share, now that I've understood that thing about myself, that when I'm stressed out, I tend to behave in ways that I normally wouldn't, that are not, you know, of my highest potential. I might even share that with my partner so that they can get an understanding and say, hey, Rashida, you know, you just yelled at me about that over there. That means that you didn't take care of yourself. And then, you know, if they know me well enough, they might suggest, go read a book, go take Aju or your bath or whatever. You know, they might do something to help me out in that situation. And vice versa. That person has to know themselves well enough to say, hey, um, I know that I got mad at you for XYZ, but it was because I felt like this. And next time, can we deal with it in this kind of way? Or can we have this kind of conversation about it? Or can you say this to me so that it will bring me back into a space of operating at my highest self? Or can you give me some space? Because a lot of times for me, when I'm at that point where it's like I'm upset, like upset, not just annoyed, but upset, I don't want to have a conversation. Like I need time to really think about what I want to say, because I'm not, thank God, I'm not somebody who says things out of anger. I know how hurtful that is. I try, right? I try to operate out of empathy for people. Um, and so things that I know that I don't like people to do to me, I don't do it to them. So, yeah, so before we get off into a tangent with this whole thing, that's where I'm going to end tonight's talk. Next time, like I said, we're going to talk about avoidance in relationships, or people who are like basically fear of commitment. And it should be a lot of fun. Until next time, though, till that video, be well.